So welcome to our first interview for Rugspirations. um, it is where I will interview different rug makers to see what makes them tick, why they do what they do, and know them just a little bit better. So our very first guest is Lara Wellman, also one of my first Zoom students, I think, ever, who I taught to rug hook on Zoom that I didn't think was possible. Anyway, welcome, Lara. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Um, and Lara was an easy first guest to choose because it was Lara's inspiration that started the Creativity Club. And the Creativity Club inspired this discussion and the idea of doing Rugspirations in general. So I remember that day fondly, but I know as memories get foggy, I wonder if you remember the same way. But after you learned how to do the basics of rug hooking, you were like super keen and motivated to do all kinds of stuff. And then it was middle of COVID. So we're out in our backyard, far apart, talking about what next in terms of classes or what you might want to do. And do you remember that conversation?
I do. And I think, there's a piece to add into that for those of you who are listening, which is also for a living, what I do is I help people build businesses, right? So there was some parts of this that were like, what would work as a business, and some parts that were like, do you know what I would like as a potential customer, right? So both of those things together. But this was early days COVID. This was in the first couple of months, and back when everybody was still baking bread and doing hobbies and in big lockdown, and there was nothing happening in person. And there was a big opportunity, I thought, to have people come together and just inspire one another online. And that I was doing this online community thing before we had to.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah, I would rather not leave my house anyway. Even if it wasn't COVID, I would rather not leave my house to do this kind of thing. I think people would do this. I would do it. And so I just remember being quite keen because I stick with things longer when I have other people to talk to them about. Like, I get a lot of my energy and excitement and inspiration from other people, which means that if I'm all by myself, like, I don't have that. So I that's the kind of thing I remember us discussing and being excited about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember thinking like, oh, well, it's one thing for you to do like business coaching and helping entrepreneurs online, have those conversations but I was like, rug hooking, I don't know. But boy, I was proven wrong. And I'm really grateful for that. And also the way one of the things I remember thinking was people like to take classes. Like that was something that was sort of stuck in my head. People are only going to take classes and then they're just going to go to hook-ins or, do their socializing that way. And I couldn't bridge the gap between doing the socializing online. But again, I was proven completely wrong. And that's kind of how the Creativity Club was, because you were like, I don't want to take tons of classes, but I'm happy to hang out with hookers and talk about rug hooking and what people are doing and seeing what other people are doing. Anyway, so that's kind of how the Creativity Club was born. And that's what we do now is we kind of socialize, but around our passion for rug hooking and punching now. And anyway, I remember it fondly.
That's awesome. And you do teach, right? There's sessions where you teach, and they're not my favorite, but they're other people's favorites, right? I'm not saying that it's not great, but I'm just like, like maybe sometimes I feel like learning a new thing, but like it's not active, because as a person, I tend to be like, I'm going to do what I feel like doing. I don't. And then if I have questions, I'm going to ask about it. I'm like, I have this idea. Can I do it?
Yes.
And so as opposed to a lot of the people in the Creativity Club who take lots of classes, I have taken like 2, right? And all of the time I'm like, and then the ones that are in the club, I'll take part, but there's not a desire for me to sign up and be like, I want to learn this thing. I want to learn that thing. And so the club gives me the opportunity to still learn things as they come up, which is the way I love to be. But for those who love to keep taking the classes, they're there too. Plus the recordings. Like, I think it makes for a really good mix for all the people.
Yeah. And I love even when other people take other courses and then come share their knowledge or their projects is super inspiring to me as well. So yeah, it's a fun mix of all of the above. And yeah, it definitely keeps me motivated to keep hooking in community like that. So thank you. And thank you for proving me wrong multiple times. Anyway, so that's kind of our intro to Rugspirations and a little bit of the Creativity Club. But the goal of these interviews will be to get through 6 questions in about 20 so minutes. And so, yeah, are you ready for the questions, Lara?
I am ready.
So could you share, although I think we kind of gave it away already, but what or who got you started in your rug making journey?
Surprise, it was Robin. And Robin was doing in-person workshops to teach people rug hooking prior to the pandemic. And I would see her doing it and I'd be like, one day I'd like to learn that, but not now.
Yeah.
Not now. I'm not ready. And I had a feeling, because I tend to go all into new hobbies and crafts. I was like, I'm not going in right now. And then you just started doing a little bit of dabbling in teaching people rug hooking online. And I signed up. And for whatever reason, I think I was the only one who signed up for that particular one. So I ended up getting like a one-on-one session where you walked me through the basics. And I felt really bad at it the first little bit. And then something just clicked. And I was like, oh, I really like this. I took your Angles in Architecture class. That was the first class I took after just learning to do a little bit of it. And I was able to create a rug hooking of a monastery that I had visited in Greece right before the pandemic. And having like mementos that mean something to me like that, it's really special for me. So there was something about, I think, doing that solidified how much I wanted to be able to keep making art with rug hooking.
Mm-hmm. That's so cool. Which part is your favorite, do you think? If you have to choose one, is it like the planning stage, the working on it, figuring it all out stage, the satisfaction of it's finished and enjoy, like I can enjoy it? Or is it shopping, gathering supplies kind of thing? Or is it something else that I've missed?
Well, it's definitely not finishing. I think it's hooking it. I like the freedom of rug hooking. And in fact, I think it's why punching I find it's a bit limiting. And so I keep being like, I'll try it. I'm like, really? About punching. But hooking, like you can just do a little bit over here, a little bit over there, a little bit here. Like you can mix things up. You're not committed to one color for a while. Like it's just, there's so much freedom to it, which I know is not how everybody thinks about rug hooking. Some people think that it is not full of freedom, but for me, it's just anything you want to do, try it.
Yeah.
And that was really fun for me. And so that's the part I still like when I mean, it's kind of like I'm like surrounded in a mess of fibers and I'm just like a little bit of this, a little bit of that, how about this now? And getting to play like that is absolutely my favorite part of it.
That's cool. Yeah, I can totally relate to that. And yet I bet there are people that are going to watch this that will not relate to the freedom part. But it'll be interesting when I speak with other rug hookers or rug makers, how the process is for them, because I'm super curious to see the differences, because not everybody teaches like I do in terms of play with whatever you want. And, there could be a whole bunch of rules and stuff. So
right. And there's 2 things that pop to mind when you say that. One is because I learned from you when I was in the Creativity Club, and there's people who have so many different years of experience and backgrounds, I'd be like, oh, that's not how I did it. That's not how I learned it. This is what, right? Like there was so much of that. And as a result, it's really cool to see people who have been hooking for 20, 30 plus years be like, I'm going to try something new.
Mm-hmm.
And they like it, right? Like to be able to do something completely new. But in terms of the freedom, so there was one workshop that you had run on the stained glass technique, which requires exceptional precision, like exceptional precision.
And I'll just
And
say, I had a or had a guest teacher come that because that is not my area of expertise.
And for whatever reason, I decided to do that project, it's quite unlike me.
Yeah.
I don't tend to gravitate towards anything that requires great precision. And I was like, no, I'm doing it. And I did it. I completed it. I finished it, the whole shebang. But there's not freedom. There's very little, I think there's some freedom, but there was not a lot of freedom in hooking that way. And so recognizing that there's just different ways that you can do this, but there's a lot of flexibility in it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. What is something that maybe you wish you'd learned sooner in your rug hooking journey?
I saw this question and I was like, oh, I don't know, because I don't know if it matters to me, right? Like this whole oh yeah, so I only learned about certain finishing techniques a little bit later, or I only learned about pulling up your tails in certain ways a little bit later. And because we started with we didn't just start with that, but I didn't even know what I was doing. So here we go, right? When you taught me, we did all yarn. Yeah. And then I think I bought a fiber pack from you. Yeah. And I was hooking, and there were wool strips in the pack that I got from you. And I was like, what is this stuff? Because I hadn't, right? Like it didn't come up in the way we're doing it. I was like, these are weird. What are they? Like, did something get run through a shredder? Like I had no concept of what it was. And so I think it's really cool to keep learning and trying new things, but there wasn't a lot that, like, for me, it's not like, oh, why didn't I know this sooner? For me, it's just layers on new skill, but I've been having fun with it all along. So I tried to think about it and I couldn't pick anything.
That's okay. And I think just from hearing you, that I think it would be really helpful, sorry, getting distracted, by having the idea of freedom. Like when you have that right at the beginning, I think when I wrote the question, I was thinking some people wouldn't have had that experience necessarily. And since you did, it's interesting that you're kind of like, yeah, it's okay, because I'll just keep learning and that's cool. When it happens, it happens. What is your favorite foundation, materials to use, or tool to use? Do you have something that you're like, oh, this is...
So I prefer to work on rug warp. I am happy enough to work on anything but burlap. My experience with burlap made me sneezy. So that was my least favorite. I don't think I could I was like, oof, this makes me sneeze a lot. I don't like it. But other than that, all of them have been fine. But rug warp is my favorite. I think just because it's a bit softer. But I use monk's cloth. So I do some tufting. So I have a lot of monk's cloth because I do tufting, and it's just able to withhold the gun better. And when I have extras, I hook in that, and I don't find it to be super problematic, right? So I'm pretty flexible about it. I like my one little starter hook that I got, and anything else I've tried, I'm like, eh. So I just keep coming back to those. You might know what it is, but the starter hook, yeah. The little red one that I think a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And so far, my favorite thing to hook on is my 17-inch Morgan hoop. I have other things. I get frustrated when anything is too big and bulky for the hoop, but I really like to be able to have it on my lap and have it be flippable And
Yeah.
like all the lap stands make that a bit
Yep.
complicated. So that is still my favorite, and not dealing with the gripper strips, because while I know there are techniques to have it not pull up yarn, it does do that a bit more. So yeah, that's my, so far it's still that hoop, and one day I'm sure I'll figure out something else, but I haven't done it yet.
That's okay. And yeah, I like rug warp too. Can you describe what rug making does for you? Like, why do you keep doing it? What brings you back?
So I've always been a maker, right? Like I love,
Mm.
you know, I was that kid who like had doodles over every sheet of paper, who at Christmas got art supplies. Like, so I've always enjoyed making things. And I've gone through a lot of phases in the last years, right? I did the scrapbooking thing, I've done sewing, I've done knitting and crocheting and acrylic painting and water painting. I've done a lot of them. But there's something about this. First of all, my husband might disagree about how messy I can make it, because I get little bits of yarn everywhere. But like, I like to do my art while I'm watching TV, and painting while watching TV is a recipe for permanent mess. I mean, and it doesn't require like, and then you need to learn this stitch and then that stitch and then this stitch, right? There's so much that you can do with just like, you pull it through. And the flexibility and freedom I had from the beginning to believe you could pull just about anything through. And I know some people pull plastic through and some, right? To me, the more somebody's like, and then I pulled metal through, and then right? Like the more it's like a little bit wacky, I'm like, ooh, that's fun. That's exciting, right? I'm like, oh, I'm going to glue a button on, and I don't tend to follow all the rules, right? I am sure that, so many of the people in the club are horrified when I'm like, and then I got out my hot glue gun.
Yeah.
And just glued stuff
talk
onto
about
it.
that.
And they're like, what? But that's the thing, is like, there's so many things that you can bring into it. You can bring crochet into it. You can bring embroidery into it. You can bring felting into it. You can bring, I've learned some carpentry since I started this, because I built a frame. I learned how to use a jigsaw so I could cut out backings for some of my things. Like, it's just allowed me to play in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I think that summarizes it well. Allows you to play. And that's what I feel like when I start something new, is it's very playful. And I kind of find it sad when I think other rug hookers don't get that feeling of playfulness, like if they're too stuck. So that's awesome that you do. Now, you shared with me a photo of one of your rugs. And I did ask you to choose only one, which I know is like
Terrible.
it's a terrible thing to ask any creative person, to like break it down to one. So I'll share that, and then we can talk a little bit about it. There we go. So it is your waterfall scene. Do you want to tell us why you chose, or why you narrowed it down to this one, if you can?
Sure. So part of it is that piece where I was saying earlier, right, with the monastery. There's something special about, like, I really did not imagine this was possible when you first told me it would be, right? Like to take a photograph of something and then to turn it into something that looked like that photograph, and that I would then be able to see, and it would carry that meaning in it. I was like, I don't know that I can, like, I don't think I can do that. And I think I can.
Yeah. You did.
And so
you did it.
Yeah. So this one was, and it's, the further you stand back from it, the more you get the feeling of it. But this is a waterfall near our cottage, and we go and visit there. And I just was like, I don't know if I can tackle this. It's a lot of rocks. It's a lot of water. It's a lot of trees. Is it going to work? But I love this one. And so, I think in the end, and there were some challenges like with the water, and I think it ended up working out in the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is too. Yeah, I love all the textures. And it is a challenge when you have a photo that has that kind of variation of texture and light and dark. And anyway, I think it's fabulous. Did you want to talk a little bit about the contrasting styles? So you did the pictorials and you've done several with, your cottage and scenery like that are gorgeous. But you also introduced me to something that I had not done before. And then I played with idea too. But the one behind you that you made, do you want to mention that?
Yes. So this is, I don't even know why I purchased it in the first place, but somebody I know has a store and I purchased some roving and I got it and I was like, this is the most delicious, luscious thing I have ever seen. And I think I had played with little bits of roving in, in other rugs, but I was like, I had seen some weavings, right? That reminded me of what I thought rug hooking could look like with the same thing. Not quite, but I was like, you could kind of do that. But have it be even less structured, right? Because like there is a certain limitation in weaving that you have to stay like in rows. And so I was just like, I'm going to just try and see if I can do it. And I just started pulling roving through in big bubbles, little bubbles. All right. Because you can just pull anything you want through. And again, I think this is one of those things. There's a couple things I've done where I'm like, could we do this? And people are like, oh, I mean, you could try. I don't think so. And I was like, it's so cool. I love it. And like, there's something about this. And, when people see it, they're like, can I just pet it?
Yeah.
But I think it's just fun and you can do so many things. I've made Christmas ornaments with it. I've made 17-inch ones. I've made 10-inch ones and they're just fun and luscious and they're not all round, but I like to do them in the round because as previously mentioned, I like to keep it in a hoop and not have to deal with moving it around. That is why most of mine are round. It's not just a style choice. Like, oh, I love round things. For me, it's also like the hoop is round and this is easy.
Yeah. And we make it work.
We make it work. We make it work.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Lara. I just want to go get hooking now and play with more fibers. But thank you so much for being my first guest and my inspiration for so many things. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you soon.